Let us see the next reading, that is mitigating counterparty credit risk. This is a kind of theoretical kind of topic, and again like we'll see many different definition, and many of the things that we have seen in the previous readings are coming over here again. So here like we are not doing much of computation, so what they're saying is we further discuss the way to mitigate the counterparty risk and credit exposure. Okay, we'll address the different methods of reducing the current and potential credit exposure. Here the methods will include examining default remote entities, different termination feature, netting and closeout feature, and the role and features of collateralization. So from the examination perspective, be familiar with the netting tables. We'll see what are the netting tables, and you should be able to compute the netting factors. Okay, and understand the benefit of risk mitigation techniques as well as the potential advantages. Okay, so let us see what they're talking about the contracts and agreements. So they're asking us to differentiate between a two-way and one-way agreement and explain the purpose of ISDA market agreement, master agreement and credit support NXC. And so we have talked about the ISDA master agreement earlier also. Okay, so what they're saying is it's very useful for both parties to mitigate the risk bilaterally under two-way agreement. Okay, under which credit mitigates apply to both the parties. Okay, when there are significant differences in the credit quality, okay, of the two parties, the one with the stronger credit quality would be able to seek better credit mitigants in its favor. So the party which is stronger, okay, he will be able to negotiate better terms in its favor. Okay, this lead to agreements or part of the agreement that are one way, okay, with certain credit mitigants that favor the higher credit quality party. Right. For example, the banks often negotiate one-way agreements in their favor when they are dealing with the hedge funds. Right. Standardization of the contracts and agreement is a key way to mitigate the credit risk. This includes standardizing over-the-counter derivatives, trading terms, and collateral, which improves liquidity and reduces the transaction cost and the cost which is related to collateral management. Okay. It also includes standardizing the credit agreements to reduce the legal uncertainty. We have seen that there can be legal uncertainty, right? So what they are saying is we have ISDA master agreements and credit support annexes, which are standardized contract, and these are the language and the terms are prepared by ISDA. Right? ISDA contract holders are ranked hand in hand with other secured, unsecured creditors. So they are saying that those who are having ISDA contract, they are treated pari passu or like at par with the other creditors in terms of the potential claims. Okay, and the CSA, okay, that is the credit support NXC, it covers over collateralization and the mark to market value of the contracts. Okay, now the next topic, the next aim statement they are talking about is the default remote entities. So they are saying that identify the types of the default remote entities and describe the problems associated with the assumptions and the fact that whether they are in fact like the default remote, whether they are like remotely considered from the default perspective, right? So mitigating counterparty risk and credit risk is important to entities when they are dealing with each other. So when they are bilateral dealing, so it is important that they mitigate. Okay, there are several mitigants. Okay, include trading with high quality. We have seen high quality counterparties, trading through SPE, trading through central counterparties. However, it is important that mitigating credit risk by trading with default remote entities is often problematic. So you may say that okay, they are remote to the default, but they can be problematic. Okay, so we have seen that dealing with high quality too big to fall, there can be problematic. Example was the bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers. Okay, a common way to mitigate this kind of risk when you are dealing with high quality is to deal with special purpose vehicle, okay, or a special purpose entities. These are bankruptcy remote entities which the company set up. These will isolate the entities from the financial risk. So we have seen earlier that if you create a SPE, let's say a company A, it creates a SPE and it ring fences or it says that it is bankruptcy remote. Okay, when they are saying that it is bankruptcy remote, it means that okay, if A goes bankrupt, the creditors of A, let's say X is the creditor of A, it cannot lay its claim on SPE because it is ring fenced or bankruptcy remote. So X cannot take the money from SPE. Right? So what they are saying is the company transfers some of the assets to the SPE, which then issues debt which is highly rated. Why it is highly rated? Because it is highly rated as compared to the rating of this A, because it is bankruptcy remote, and there is a protection against the protection when the parents default on its debt, nobody can lay claim on the SPE. Okay, so that is the benefit. That is why it is rating, its rating is higher than the parent. Okay. So that is why they're typically rated higher than the parent's debt. Entity which are dealing with SPE are protected against the parent's company insolvency. One issue that arises with SPE through experience, it is like theoretically it may be different. Through experience, what they are saying is questions regarding the enforceability of the legal structure of SPE. Right? Enforceability of the legal structure. For example, many clients of Lehman had to endure a significant wait time, okay, before they could receive their cash. Okay, so please know that many clients of Lehman Brothers, they had this Lehman SPE, they thought that it is bankruptcy remote, but they had to endure a significant wait time before they can receive the cash, which initially believed was fully secured against bankruptcy. So there can be practical issues. Theoretically it is bankruptcy remote, but it can take some time to get your money back. Another type of default remote entity is the central counterparty. We have seen central counterparty, they play a key role in mitigation of the credit and counterparty risk in exchange traded derivative trading, and have been one of the major reason that your derivatives trading has emerged so high on the exchange. Okay, so central counterparties like exchange, they minimize the probability of failure of any single institution. Okay, and they allow for loss sharing among the counterparties. As a result, the mitigation of the risk is there for the failure of single institution. Right? Trading on organized exchanges with central counterparty also has disadvantages. So what they are saying is, contrary to the standardized exchanges, parties can create and quickly trade custom instrument in the OTC market. Okay, so obviously as compared to the exchange, you have like in OTC market you can trade custom instrument. When you are trading with central counterparties, it creates moral hazard problem. Wherein like when A and B, we have seen the previous chapter, when this is an exchange and A and B are trading, so they are not worried about what is the credit characteristics of B, because it knows that it will be protected by the exchange. Because the existence of a central counterparty, that causes the entities to have little incentive to monitor the credit quality of the other. So this is the moral hazard problem. Okay, now they are saying that what are the termination and walkaway feature. Okay, so we have talked about the termination and walkaway in the previous section. We'll see in detail. So they're saying that describe how termination and walkaway features work in credit contract. To termination event allow institutions to terminate a trade, okay, before their counterparties become bankrupt. So before the counterparty become bankrupt, you can terminate the contract. So there is a break clause. Okay, so a specific termination event is called as a break clause, also called as a liquidity put. Okay, so this will, or early termination option, it allows a party to terminate a trade at a specific future date at the market rate. Okay, these are often bilateral, allowing either party to terminate a transaction, and are useful in providing an option to terminate the transaction. So these break clauses, they are useful to terminate the transaction, especially when the trades are long term, okay, long dated. Okay, this break clauses, they do not cause any money, so these are done without cost. Okay, and this is without cost when the quality of the counterparty decline. So there is the advantage is that, like, if the other party's credit quality is going down, okay, you can break it. So they are saying that despite their advantages, okay, break clause have not been highly popular. Okay, one explanation what they are saying is that the break clause represent a discrete form of collateralization. It is kind of a collateralization only. Okay, however, what they are saying is collateralization can be better achieved. You can achieve. So they are saying that break clauses are like collateralization, and they are saying that if it is like collateralization, we can achieve better collateralization by continuous posting of collateral. So you do the mark to market continuously, and whenever there is a shortfall of collateral, you post the collateral. Okay, another explanation they are giving is called as a banker's paradox. Okay, which says that for a break clause to be useful, okay, for a break clause to be useful, it should be exercised early on. Okay, it should be exercised much before the decline in a counterparty's credit quality. It should not happen when the counterparty is kind of defaulting, right? They are saying that entities, however, they avoid early exercise to preserve their good relationship. Please note that, let's say you have entered into a contract with B, okay, and B is expected that, okay, its credit quality is going down. If let's say before that you break the clause, so what happens is the news will spread with the market, okay, and all this party, they will start saying that, okay, B is into some problem, right? So what happens is, to preserve their good relationship with B, A will say that, okay, I know that you are having some problem, but I will not exercise this, okay, I will exercise it later when your thing it emerges in the market. That is the idea, right? Then you have something called as additional termination event, okay. It is another form of termination event, okay, which allows a firm to terminate a trade if a specified event occurs. So there are some specific termination event. If those occurs, so then you can terminate, okay. So the common termination events are rating triggers, if there is a downgrade, okay, mergers, if there are some management changes, CEO, CFO changes, if the NAV of the firm declines, or there are some key person events, right? So these are your called as additional termination event. Whenever this happens, you can terminate your contract. So what they're saying is, as case with AIG, okay, please note in 2007-8 AIG was on the verge of bankruptcy, right? Triggering ATEs can lead to further deterioration in the credit quality of the counterparty. So if these events they are triggered and you will exercise your right, so what happens is this can further lead to deterioration of the credit quality of the counterparty, and the feature is actually becoming less useful because it increases the systemic risk, okay. Then there are like walkaway clauses which we discussed. It allows an entity to benefit from the default of counterparty. Okay, under this clause, an entity can walk away from or avoid its net liabilities. We have seen that if A has to give B $5 and B goes bankrupt, A will walk away, and as a result it gets benefited. They are saying that walkaway clauses were popular prior to 1992, but they have become less common after that, okay, after the ISDA agreement has come. They have also been criticized for creating additional cost for the counterparty in the event of default. So what happened is, like in the event of default, okay, B was supposed to get 5, it is not getting 5, so there is additional cost. So this guy is in default, and that too you are not paying the 5 which it deserves. So that is what it is criticized, and they are saying that it creates a moral hazard. Okay, so since a walkaway feature may already be priced in a transaction, hiding some of the risk in a transaction, so there is a moral hazard. So these are saying that, okay, for this reason these clauses should be ultimately avoided. So these walkaway clauses etc., these should be avoided when you are working in a OTC kind of transaction, okay. Then the next they are talking about is a netting and the closeout process, okay. So they are saying they describe the netting and closeout process, including multilateral netting, explain the advantages, disadvantage, and how they fit into the framework of the ISDA master agreement. Okay, so let us see the netting closeout arrangement between two counterparties. Okay, netting is also known as set off. Okay, so you will do set off. We have seen the netting. It generally refers to combining the cash flow from different contracts with the counterparty into a single net amount. So let's say you can have 2-3 contracts. Let's say in A was supposed to get 5, B was supposed to get 2. Okay, so you will net within the contract. So net you will say 3. Okay, let's say here A was supposed to give -5 and B was supposed to give -2 plus 2. So this is -3. Like that you can set off across all the different products. We'll see in examples in the table that are given in the next page. Right. So what they're saying is, this payment netting which reduces the settlement risk. A related concept is a closeout netting, which refers to the netting of the contract values. Okay, so the netting of the contract values will be done, okay, in the event of a counterparty's default. So when a counterparty is defaulting, at that time you would net out all the payments etc. that is done to be done, because that will be really useful, because as you know that bankruptcy court, they unnecessarily take a lot of time. So this helps a lot this party, okay, who has to receive money. The concept of both netting and closeout incorporate two related rights under a single contract. The right to terminate a contract unilaterally under certain conditions. So the right to terminate, when the company is going into default, you have the right to terminate the contract, and you have the right to offset the amount due to termination into a single sum. So you have the right to offset and you get a single sum. So they are saying that before we examine the closeout, it is important to discuss netting in more detail. Netting has enabled, so explosive growth we have seen in the market, it is because of the netting, enabled by the netting. So netting has enabled explosive growth in credit exposure and notional value of the trade, and now covers most derivative transaction. Institutions often have multiple trades with a counterparty, and these trades can constitute hedges whose value move in opposite direction. Or they may constitute unwinds where you are doing a reverse trade which is equal to the opposite value. Right? Without netting, an entity's exposure of two equal and opposite trades is positive mark to market exposure. So what they are saying is, suppose if an entity has equal and opposite trade, so with one party it has to let's say one party has to give 10 and from another party he has to receive 10. So what happened is, from the point of view of A, it is netted 0, but this is B and this is C. There are two different parties, right? As a result, what happens is, without this netting, since A has to get from C 10, so the exposure of A is plus 10. So the positive exposure of A is plus 10. So that is what they are saying. Without netting, the exposure is plus 10. That means if the counterparty defaults, the value of the two trades is not netted. If this guy is defaulting, C will not give money to A, but B will claim $10 from A. As a result, this is problem, right? So what they are saying is, with the surviving entity having to make a settlement under the negative mark to market while he is unable to collect on the positive one. Therefore, without netting, overall exposure is additive as a sum of the positive mark to market values. However, with netting, exposures are not additive and it can significantly reduce the risk. We'll see that in the tables that we will have, right? Now what they are saying is, netting has several advantages and disadvantages. It has advantages is exposure reduction, right? So what they are saying is, by offsetting exposure with parties managing net position, netting reduces the risk and improves the operational efficiency. But they are saying that netted exposures can be volatile, which may result in difficulty in controlling the exposure. So exposure is reduced, but it becomes volatile. Unwinding position. If there is an entity who wants to exist illiquid OTC trade with one counterparty, by entering into an offsetting trade with another counterparty, the entity will remove its market risk. However, it will be exposed to the counterparty and operational risk. We have seen just the example. Netting removes this risk through executing a reverse position with the initial counterparty and removing both the market and the counterparty risk. So when you are saying that, when you have a contract with B and now B wants to get away with the contract and A would want to get with C. So what happens is, like, even if you are you may get with another party C, you still have exposure. So what you want is, you have market risk is removed, but the credit risk has come with the other party, right? So you may want to close out fully with B. By the netting it can happen, right? The downside is that the initial counterparty, knowing that the entity is looking to exit the trade, so what happens is, if you see A knows that B is looking to exit the trade, it may impose less favorable term for offsetting the transaction. This may happen. Then you have multiple position. An entity can reduce counterparty risk, obtain favorable trade terms and reduce collateral requirements by trading multiple position with the same counterparty. So it can reduce counterparty risk and can get favorable terms. It can reduce collateral requirements by trading multiple position. Stability, they are saying that without netting, entities trading with insolvent or troubled companies would be motivated to cease trading and terminate existing contracts. So without netting, they would terminate existing contract, which would again create problem in the financial distress, right? However, with netting, the risk is significantly reduced and agreement with troubled counterparty is more achievable. Okay. Now what they are saying is netting agreement, okay, specifically closeout netting are legal agreements. These are legal agreements and they become effective when the counterparty default. Netting agreements are governed by ISDA agreements, which serves to eliminate the legal uncertainty and reduces the counterparty risk under a single legal contract, and it has an indefinite term. So please note that the legal risk is also removed because ISDA master agreements are the agreements here. A single universal agreement also help to avoid problems that may result from different treatment of bankruptcy. Please note that we have seen that, okay, there can be differences in the bankruptcy treatment by the different parties. Some may say that, okay, downgrade is not a default. Some may say that, okay, that payment of coupon is not a default. So there can be differences in the treatment of bankruptcy. Okay, so ISDA has obtained legal opinions in most jurisdictions. Agreements often cover bilateral netting, which is used for OTC derivatives and repo transaction, and as well as balance sheet loans and deposit. Okay, when no legal agreement exists which allows for netting, exposure do not offset each other and these are additive. So exposure will keep on adding, right? Okay. Now they are saying that closeout and netting becomes advantageous in a derivative transaction if they are following the default of a counterparty when cash flow cease. Okay, since the right to allow an entity to execute, because this cash flow, because what happens is, what they are saying is closeout and netting, it becomes advantageous, okay, because following the default when the cash flow cease, because these rights allow an entity to execute new replacement contract. It is clear that closeout arrangements, okay, they protect the solvent or the surviving entity. Okay, note that they are saying that closeout is different from an acceleration clause. Okay, in an acceleration clause, what happens is the creditor, it allows the creditor to accelerate. Okay, that is, whatever the payments are due later, they have to be paid in advance. So it allows the creditor to accelerate the future payments given a credit event. Okay, like credit events can be rating downgrades. Okay, in contrast to acceleration, closeout clauses allows all contracts between a solvent and insolvent entity to be terminated, which cancels the contract and creates a claim for compensation. So what they are saying is, in contrast to acceleration, closeout allows all the contracts to be terminated and it cancels out all the contracts and it creates a claim. Okay, if the solvent entity has a negative, they are saying that if the solvent entity has a negative mark to market exposure, okay, so if there is a negative mark to market exposure, okay, then the full payment is made to the insolvent entity. If the mark to market is positive, then the solvent entity becomes a creditor for the amount and can terminate and replace the contracts with other entity. So please note that, okay, full payment is made to the insolvent entity. Okay, if the mark to market is exposure is positive, solvent entity becomes a creditor for the amount. Okay, now they are saying that both acceleration and closeout clauses have been criticized for making the refinancing for the debtor becoming more difficult. Okay, both clauses cause payment amounts to be immediately due and may speed the distress of the insolvent entity. Okay, so that is the reason that what happens is many times courts, they put a stay order or temporary suspension on the agreements to allow for a short period of time out. So there is a short period of time out given while maintaining the validation. So they say that, okay, the termination clause are valid, but the bankrupt party is under stress, so please allow them some time so that they come out of the stress and they pay you money. However, what they are saying is, despite this criticism, closeout clauses can be very advantageous to the parties. Okay, closeout limits the uncertainty in the value of an entity's position with an insolvent party. Okay, without closeout, entity would have difficulty in estimating the position offset and also the recovery because exposure is not known. However, with closeout, the solvent entity can fully rehedge the transaction, okay, with the insolvent entity while it is waiting to receive the claim. As a result, what happens is, although the solvent entity may experience some risk loss, it would minimize the market risk and also the uncertainty with respect to the trading. Okay. In addition, closeout allows to freeze the exposure. So it allows the entities to freeze their exposure. Since these exposure amounts are known and will not fluctuate, the entity can better hedge this exposure. Okay. The next thing they are talking about is the netting and closeout between multiple counterparties. So till now we have been focused on the bilateral netting. So what happens is the bilateral netting is important in reducing the exposure. However, it is limited to two parties only. In reality, what happens, the trades are structured such that there are multiple counterparties. So A can have exposure to B, B can have exposure to C, C can have exposure to A. The default of any of these entities would give rise to question on how you will allocate the losses. Under multilateral netting, what happens is netting arrangements would involve multiple counterparties. We have seen the multilateral netting, right? And as a result, what will happen is it will mitigate the counterparty and the operational risk. The multilateral netting is achieved with a central entity such as an exchange or clearing house. Okay. Handling the netting process includes valuation, settlement and collateralization. Okay. However, there is a disadvantage that this type of netting arrangement, it mutualizes the counterparty risk and it results in less incentive for entities to monitor each other's credit qualities. Because of this, okay, you are not monitoring the credit qualities. Okay. Multilateral netting can enable redundant trading position to get accumulated in the system, which will, so these are redundant trading position. As a result, what happens is, okay, overall the position is null, okay, but individually you will have to still manage, which will result in high operational cost, right? So what they are saying is this risk is reduced by firms which uses algorithms to detect and reduce the redundant position. Okay. Also they are saying that multilateral netting, it requires trading disclosures, which may be disadvantageous to some firms which would want to keep this information confidential.